Today I've got with me Darryl, and we're going to be talking about Taoist principles, Taoist principles for technology development. This is something that Darryl is extremely passionate about, and we're going to dig into this and talk about this in a lot of detail. Darryl, where can people find you?
So probably the best place to connect with me and see what I'm up to would be LinkedIn. Spend a lot of time there. It seems to be the social network that's emerging as a, uh, a hub of quality content. Perhaps I'm sure they would love to
It
hear me say
seems to be
that.
the social network which seems to be stable in some shape or form as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, stable. So stability is the right. Yes, exactly. So that's a virtue that we value here. So yeah, and also Kanouse.net, my last name.net. I've a bunch of other non-Tao and tech related stuff. It's a good place to see where I'm doing things there too.
So you've got two really big interests in life, haven't you? One is Taoism, and the other is tech and development, and you've brought the two together. So talk us a little bit about your tech background, because you've worked at some quite exciting companies, haven't you? You worked at Canva and um,
Yeah,
Amazon as well, which
that's right. Yeah, so I've been fortunate to work at some pretty big companies that have been done some really interesting and exciting things. I started my career as a software developer in the marketing technology space, so building websites, and moved into data-driven experiences. Eventually, that led me to Activision, where I worked on the Call of Duty franchise, building personalization systems for communication and player engagement. That work led me to Amazon, where Amazon is on the forefront of that kind of personalization and data-driven experience area. So I was fortunate enough to be able to work there and build some of those systems internally, and really enjoyed that experience. Left there, went to Canva, another company that's talking to tens, hundreds of millions of customers, and got to enjoy that experience as well. And one of the things that I noticed is that each one of those companies, they're very big, they're very successful, and they're all very different in their internal cultures and how they operate. And so in my role as a solutions architect and technical product developer who thinks about systems and how to go from basically zero to deployment of these things, having to navigate those cultures is interesting, because cultures, when they're effective, they provide guardrails, and they kind of, I wouldn't say they necessarily need to mandate. A good culture might not mandate, but they guide you down a certain path. But when you go from such distinct cultures, like say from Amazon to Canva, there's a bit of a cultural whiplash, and
I
a lot
can
of really
imagine.
fun.
Yeah, it's like two sides of a coin. It must be. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they really, they couldn't have been more different. If I'm being frank, Amazon, very document oriented process. 20 years of establishing the most highly optimized internal structure. Whereas Canva, very freewheeling, intuition driven. Melanie Perkins, CEO, her charisma just dominates how that company operates. And so there's definitely some cultural whiplash. This was probably about 2 years ago when I made that change. And this is where I really found bringing my interest in Taoism that I had sort of fostered in my personal life into my professional life actually was a great benefit to me. It gave me an opportunity to really see where there are common, foundational, universal principles that can apply in technology development in the same way that Taoism talks about the interconnectedness of the universe and sort of how to operate in that.
So for people that are watching, that don't know what Taoism is, can you give us a little bit of a sketch of how you see Taoism?
Yeah, it's ancient Chinese philosophy. Lao Tzu, the teacher, is credited with writing the book called the Tao Te Ching, which serves as sort of the source book for that philosophy. It has, like many of the philosophies that emerge in that area, whether it's Buddhism or Taoism or Confucianism or any of those others, there's an interesting balance there between what you would consider to be a religion and its approach to ritual and faith, and then a philosophy, which is more of an academic
Because
discourse.
because in the Western eyes, we tend to we see these things as religions, don't we? whereas actually they're quite often, as you said, it's a philosophy of life.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a little bit of flexibility, I think, in an approach. And I as a Westerner who values a kind of Aristotle kind of perspective on things and sort of the geometry and how things work, I tend to apply that lens to the Eastern stuff and see it as more philosophical in nature. But it makes sense, though, that if you are fully immersed in it and live it day to day, and you can apply rituals and you can live a religious life in that way. And I think that that's great for those folks that do that.
Yeah. And so talk us about how you have kind of fused these two, the philosophy and the development, because in a way we have the current development platform that most people talk about would be something like DevOps, because we've tended to when I first started in the world in tech, it was all about case, and then it was something else, and then water flow, or I can't remember, waterfall or something. I'm not a developer, and we've generally carried on, and we've innovated the processes. So talk us through how you think about why you fuse these together.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the core I guess ideas that emerges out of Taoism is this idea. It's called Wu Wei, and it can be translated in various ways as either non-action or effortless action. And oftentimes we can relate to it in Western ideas as sort of a flow state where things happen naturally as they're supposed to, and they're right. And that effortless approach is an ideal, and it's something to strive for. And when you live your life in balance and in harmony, that's sort of a result of it. In DevOps, I've never met a DevOps engineer that didn't want to figure out how to do less and how to automate and how to basically, if they're doing their job right, they're really not doing anything. And I think that there's a natural kind of relationship, I think, between those two ideas. But in more practical terms, there are ideas, that path to the flow state or the effortless action and that harmony that is the ideal. That path is led and kind of paved with ideas around interconnectedness, adaptability, balance, and simplicity. And at least when I found, when I was uncertain about say conflicting priorities and about the way that the cultures and folks were trying to influence outcomes, if I could reduce things down to what are the connection points, how can I remain flexible, how can we balance all of the interests of everybody that's involved, and how can we reduce complexity and stay simple, that led to that produced successful outcomes, and that produced results. And digging into it further, what I found was that if you take the ideas of interconnectedness, adaptability, balance, and simplicity, and initially you may think of it as a checklist where, I'm confronted with a challenge, I need to make a decision, I need to prioritize certain operations or technical initiatives. If you use that checklist to evaluate where's the connections, how can I stay adaptable, where's the balance, how can I simplify, over time, that starts to morph into almost an intuition about what harmony and looks like. And you can actually move much, much faster over time, even though initially, a checklist, it feels like you're creating friction and there's interference and I've got more stuff to think about. But it actually tunes your perspective in a way where you start to recognize things that are in harmony and systems that are working well together. You have, reducing notifications, so you have less notification fatigue, and really just focusing on those things that matter. Being able to ensure that you've got the perspective of a customer, so that you simplify interfaces, even though you may have some pet features that you want to deploy. Think of, there's always opportunities to simplify, and that becomes an intuition. And it's that intuition that you can take into almost any circumstance. And regardless of whether there are mandates for extreme documentation or lots of testing, you'll still be able to recognize harmony and systems that are sustainable in terms of their long-term viability and those kinds of things.
So go through those 4 things again. So there's interconnectedness, adaptability, balance, and simplicity. So walk us through that. So walk us through those, Darryl.
Yeah. So interconnectedness, from a technology perspective. Well, okay. So first, I'll start from just in a philosophical sense. The Taoism and its recognition of interconnectedness is a recognition that all things are connected, and there is the Tao, or the way, is the animating force of this unified universe. And so understanding and appreciating that interconnectedness allows you to be more responsive and to see your place in the world in clearer terms. From a technology perspective, all systems are integrated in some way or another. If you're building a cloud-based application, you're connecting to the internet, someone's touching it, they have systems. And appreciating the fact that there are these connections and integrations and APIs helps you stay mindful of your role in a broader ecosystem. And so now these 4 things, they all sort of work together. But if you recognize the interconnectedness, you'll begin to value the simplicity, because you'll know that your connections to other systems are made more efficient and better when they're simpler and easier to understand. So that's the interconnectedness dimension to it.
And I understand, I think that sometimes, we log onto the internet and everything's flows very freely, but we don't necessarily think about actually the fact that things are connected and there's some sort of technological handshake going on.
Yeah. There and there's a sense that if you're going to play in that environment where everything is connected, you have there's an ethical component to it too, and you have obligations to be a good player in this environment. And because of that connectivity, you don't want to saturate bandwidth with too much. You want to be efficient with your data delivery, and you want to be a good player that encourages more integrations and more adoption of whatever your system is. And I will just pause to take a minute to say that all of this, it does funnel into, from a business perspective, successful initiatives. One is that users appreciate, that can make you money, and that everybody has a business to run, and we're not just here to necessarily sit and be balanced and meditate. Yeah. Exactly.
So within interconnectedness, you then talk about adaptability, don't you?
Adaptability, right? And so in some of the key themes in Taoism that you'll find throughout the Tao Te Ching, for example, are the ideas of harmony and also sustainability. And I mean sustainability in the sense of a kind of everlasting nature. I'm not talking necessarily ecological sustainability, but more just do the things that you create, and does your life, and do things sustain themselves over time. That's how systems, when if we're going to spend the time and the money to build things, we want them to last. And so appreciating that things change, and because you're connected to other things that are going to change, that interconnectedness, appreciating that leads into an understanding that in order for your systems to sustain themselves for the long term, they need to adapt. You'll need to be flexible. You'll need to, for example, again, they all work together in some ways, but appreciating the simplicity and the balance that's going to be required to have your system flex with peaks in demand, new integrations, growth. And if your business is going to grow, you're going to need to adapt to new scenarios and new use cases. And so taking that mindset initially of the checklist, but eventually that becomes intuition as you look through your features and your development and your roadmap, and you want to ensure that you're accounting for potential needs in the future to adapt. So very building in really rigid constraints and rigid oversight and protocols is not necessarily helpful for your long-term sustainability and prospects.
And then after adaptability, you've got balance, haven't you?
That sure balance. This is a everlasting dilemma in technology is how you prioritize on all fronts, right? How do you prioritize near-term investments in features versus long-term platform investments for greater durability? How do you balance data privacy requirements with data access and availability for good user experiences? There are almost every decision that you make when you're thinking about technology and how you build things involves some form of trade-off and some need for a balance. and I think that's really key. And so this is another one where if you put the Taoist lens on your technology initiatives, you'll ask yourself and remind yourself to be mindful of where am I maybe potentially out of balance, and have I considered in every choice what are the trade-offs, and how am I mitigating any potential imbalance that might come from over investing in one area versus another.
And then finally, you have simplicity as well, don't you, in terms of those four?
Yeah, and if I'm ultimately, I think that's both the top and the bottom of everything that makes this relationship between Taoism and technology work, and it's everything is more manageable when it's simple. Some of this almost sounds obvious, but if you take into consideration how things are interconnected, how you need to maintain balance, where adaptability comes from, you almost always end up with an idea that is simpler than maybe what you thought, and that tends to be the right choice. And so, if you when you look at the work that you do, I think you'll find it's just incredibly helpful to look and say, hey, where are my opportunities to simplify this? And that time spent in simplifying, clarifying, reducing things down to their core value and their elemental import always produces good results.
I wrote down a note when we did the prep call, and I wrote, "Move faster with less resistance."
Yes, that's right.
It must have been something that you said, Darryl.
What's that?
You must have said, "Move faster with less resistance."
Oh yeah. I think that's the core of, or the core outcome of operating in this sort of Taoist function, and in this method, achieving that Wu Wei state, and doing more with less, and moving faster is that's the way. That's the Wu Wei.
And how does this, and how, going back to the DevOps situation, and thinking about agile and stand-ups and sprints and stuff like that, how do you see that all interweaving together?
So I think stand-ups are great opportunities to have those discussions about alignment and values, or valuing these principles. And so I would never suggest that adopting this philosophy necessarily needs to result in a change in methodologies or principles. So folks running agile shops should continue to run agile shops if that works for them, but weaving these ideas into that process. And so in traditional agile methodologies, there's lots of checkpoints. You've got daily stand-ups where we can check on simplicity and remind everybody on the team about the potential connected nature of the things that they're working on, and question each other's appreciation for the adaptability in the work that they're doing. When you talk about sprint retrospectives and you're evaluating the work that you delivered over the past few weeks, great opportunity to ask yourselves the questions about, did we apply simplicity in the best way? When you're evaluating what worked and what didn't, the things that didn't work, how could they be improved by a greater appreciation for balance and adaptability? So I think, that's the way I would like to see folks incorporate these ideas, is weave them into what you do and how you work. And I think you'll find that you can really shortcut a lot of the more laborious conversations to get right down to the root of what can make things better quicker.
Maria Humphreys says, "I love this conversation. Slowing down is more productive." Maria is probably down the road from you, Darryl, because she's over that part of the world.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. Slowing down to as an exercise in evaluation and simplification. I think that's all great. This is you know, the yin and the yang and those ideas of the way that things sort of work together. And they sound like, oftentimes they sound like contradictions to say that slowing down will let you move faster. Um, and you know, in Buddhism, koans are a really popular way to meditate on the nature of the universe and its potential contradictory influences. And so that idea of and this is one of them. I think those ideas of how you can slow down to move faster is a great example of that.
And Maria says that she's watching on X or Twitter in old money. So interconnected platforms.
Yeah. We're all connected. Yeah, it's amazing how it's hard to imagine any technology system that isn't connected to every other technology system, and that's one of the the interesting things that just in philosophizing a bit about how Taoism describes the universe and its interconnected nature. It's almost as if in technology with a big T, in that world, the way that it exists in our universe is all connected in the same way and has the same dynamic and the same interplay.
Darryl, thank you so much for coming on and talking about Taoism and technology developments. It's a fascinating subject. And you know, we've had a number of people, and we've got some comments from Maria as well. So thank you so much for that. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
So yeah, LinkedIn is probably, I'd love to connect with folks on LinkedIn, see what other folks are doing. That tends to be where I post updates about stuff that I'm doing. I'm Darryl Kanouse. It's my LinkedIn handle. That's probably the best way to reach me. I am also on X, Twitter. I'll still call it Twitter.
I know. I still want. I call it X because I kind of feel forced to, but you know.
Yeah.
But it's still a tweet, you know, even though they say it's a post. You know,
I tweet, I retweet. Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah, it's
and
not it just doesn't have that ring to it, does it?
No. Like I don't X. I don't re-X. I don't do that. I tweet. I don't know. Maybe over time, you know, we'll see how our language evolves on that. But yeah.
Darryl, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I really, I loved the conversation.